3 out of 3 EU FNCS weeks were won by the Sweaty Sands team. Not Doom's Domain, not Stark Industries, but Sweaty Sands. 2 times by Forza Arkezix and Nate, and 1 time by Analex, Janice, and X-Sweez. Interestingly enough, each of these teams containing 1/2 of the duo FNCS champions in Analex and Nate, who did land Sweaty Sands in their run to win. So my hot take today is, with all this talk about, Benji, Savage, and Letshi with Aqua's band not being able, or being uncontested at Doom's Domain, are we actually worried about the wrong POI being uncontested? Because 3 out of 3 wins is pretty convincing. And I understand that this take, with the evidence that I'm going to present, is definitely super conditional, given the fact that Stark Industries with Marvel Tayson and Mitro was contested 2 out of 3 weeks, and also obviously 3 out of 3 weeks we've had contested Doom's Domain. But I do think that we're all so caught up in the idea that these mythic POIs have such crazy loots and the mythic powers that we forget about all the other circumstantial things that actually tend to, kind of be more important in the game of Fortnite. So that's my take. I don't necessarily stand by it fully, but I do want to basically show off some of these games from the 2 teams who did win those 3 out of 3 weeks. So let's do it. And don't forget to like and subscribe as I try to make my point here. Sweaty Sands is obviously ridiculously powerful. I mean, we've seen this since the squads days. Obviously it has, 34 chests, I think very close to the most in anything, but it also has access to so much fishing, good materials, good mobility, good amount of floor loot spawns, and a good amount of ammo boxes. I mean, thinking about it, there's 71 ammo boxes, which is quite a lot, and 141 floor loot spawns. Let's compare this to spots near them, right? Let's compare it to, for example, Holly Hedges and Salty Springs, the 2 POI nearest to them. Holly Hedges has 14 chests. Salty Springs has 11. And I know that might sound surprising compared to the 34 out of Sweaty Sands, but the loot imbalance is crazy in this entire area. Pretty much every single game, these guys are going to have purple pumps because they're able to spend the time upgrading, and they have the wealth of materials to be able to do it for all of them. But let's look at what this loot imbalance actually does for them, though. So actually, all the Sweaty Sands teams that I've been watching have been really, really aggressive with this loot imbalance, and mostly timing pushes in this, southwestern area of the map. Holly Hedges, the beach, and anybody kind of rotating in as well. In this game specifically, they end up finding an opportunity here to hold a bunch of people out of zone. This is Wakey, Snappy, and Michael. And the interesting part to me in this is the loot, like just straight up looking at it. When we're looking at first zone as teams are starting to rotate in, when basically everybody's done looting, there's nothing else you're going to be able to find. Look at the loot on this team. Nothing better than a nothing better than a blue AR, and their pumps are really, really weak. And now looking back at 4ZR, and then they have all, epic pumps, they have good ARs, they have a bunch of heals, all that stuff. So naturally we think that they should have the advantage in this fight. In any case, they're not really, most of the time they are kind of trying to push in, but with the congestion that is on this backside of zone, they don't want to get too crazy. Putric, Hen, and Deciptos are holding them out, but they'll turn. And they have the ammo that other teams don't at this stage of the game. They each have above 250 AR ammo that they can do plays like this and bully positionally very hard. This team will stay in zone for the entirety of they didn't even make it into that first zone, and the entirety of second zone as they rotate next to them. I definitely have to say that they played a little bit less aggressively than they did in week number 1 from the games that we're watching right now, which are week number 2, but they for sure still had this idea in mind that they want to clear out this space and make people know the way that they play. It's always trying to be aggressive in second zone to get surge, whether you're box fight trading or fully engaging in a fight or just storm holding people. It's aggressive and it's forcing recalculations on the other team. So basically, because of their massive loot imbalance, they've actually forced 2 teams to rotate really, really wide and on the coast. Both of these guys are now starting to spray each other while they basically have a free path. They use their loot imbalance from Sweaty Sands to get pretty decent rotate in while zone is moving. They don't have to worry too much about storm fights in this day and age. We're not that psycho anymore, I think, especially when it comes to finals. But the big thing for them is they force these guys all the way over here, and yeah, because they're rotating in there will be a storm fight, an unavoidable storm fight, because of the way that Kezik's 4ZR at Nate forced them that direction. They already have a couple knocks. And then the other thing too, these guys are not afraid to continue using their advantage and be in zone a little bit, considering that 4ZR actually carries a bandage cannon this entire time. So any zone damage they take in the second and third, they're not too worried about it. You don't see them in this situation often, but it does net them kills, and it does net them another good setup going into endgame. So third zone here, they're going to continue to rotate more passively in these cases, but already in third zone, they have 3 kills. Let's fast forward a bit and see how they are in their end game setup. So they lose Nate, but entirely, I mean, they've gotten 5 kills up to this point. They're about to get into half and half once they move and rotate through this fourth zone, and they're really comfortable playing in a man down situation. That's not the end of the world for them, but it doesn't actually happen all that often where they consistently are getting into this stage of the game with 3 eliminations, with 4 eliminations, or even 5 eliminations. And that's what made the difference for them, was consistency in eliminations and obviously placement. We talk about stuff like that a lot, but it's really impressive how they're able to average 7 elims over 12 games. And over 12 games, that is a significant amount of points. But look at it. 3 shockwaves still, 3 bouncers. They're set for mobility for the entire game. They've got heals aplenty, and their loadout is good. I mean, sure, the blue burst isn't most ideal, but you'll see games where they all have, you know, purple ARs, purple bursts, and whatnot. I think I definitely want to add a little caveat to this whole discussion, is that, you know, a bad team at Sweaty Sands would not be able to do what they do effectively because their skills are clearly, you know, taking them up and above, but the setup out of Sweaty Sands also enables them to do this. They just take great advantage of it, and that's why I'm so scared. So I'm in the next game, and I want to note one thing about the early game here is that teams would rather fight Holly Hedges than be in this area whatsoever, because in warmups, in week 1, in semifinals, these guys are constantly pushing here, no matter what zone. And I talked about that a little bit in the last video with Illust, where these guys will look for timing pushes on even beach and castle in some cases. And if you watch the week 1 games, although the replays for that are a little scuffed, you will see them consistently in fights, not only against these teams in this area and this area, but also pushing into Holly Hedges. And now in week number 2 and even in week number 3 and beyond, we're going to see this respect given to them, not landing over here because the loot and balance is too great. If they decide they want to push you, they're going to win that fight, especially with 50% chest spawns. There's another thing here that actually comes out a little bit later to me from these guys, is that they give themselves a lot of options. Right now they're pushing out to the spot that I just talked about, but more importantly, they're kind of hunting for the beach team. They're hunting for the Holly Hedges team. How are they rotating through? And is it possible to beat them to this rift? This rift is a utility here that not many other spots have a useful rift, is what I'd say. Because yeah, sure, Stark has rifts, but what do you need the rifts for when you're already center zone? I'd say the Craggy Rift, for example, is a really, really good one, and the Misty Meadows one is too. But what is enabled out here is that they can do stuff before rifting and then, you know, make up time with this rather than kind of just having to spend it at the beginning. Because what are you doing out here in Craggy Cliffs early on? I think the Misty Meadows one is definitely a more useful utility rift. I'm not saying that these rifts are bad at all. They're obviously very useful, but I think that these ones have a lot more potential for options. And we'll watch one of their other options when they get even better zone, which is to do with the Salty Springs team, which once again, they have a loot and balance against a little bit later on. So here's where the fight kind of breaks out. They've been tracking this team, landing at beach, trying to rotate through Holly Hedges, and they're keeping them at bay, pushing them farther away because both of these guys kind of have eyes on each other. So they're just waiting to see, hey, you guys are going to rift out? And the answer is no. Of course, we're going to use you for surge tags. Like, why would we? Eventually, we will rift, and we will go more towards the center, but we still stay on the edge. Once again, this is a decision that I don't think that every team is making at this point, but they also do kind of get forced down by the wealth of teams on the mountain. So every once in a while they do. I mean, obviously they rifted away slightly early there out of Holly Hedges, but they keep so good track of exactly what teams are coming through on the west side, depending on zones, that they're comfortable taking fights like this. They're comfortable figuring out which team is which and which team might, once again, be at a disadvantage because of the loot that they had out of their paths, and they'll be able to get out of situations like this constantly. And this Void, Pinkay, and Monster Muncher here, they've actually fought them so many times in the week 2 finals, beating them ridiculous amounts. All the games that I watched, they didn't lose, or they didn't even really have any trouble. Okay, so this timing is consistently what gets them surge, but if you haven't seen this yet, this tip has kind of been going around. When you knock somebody and you're safe, pick them up and then use your pump to be able to get them all the way down to get a max damage shot. Just to get extra surge, it does count on dead bodies. While that fight was going on, I did want to open up the map to kind of show, I don't know, there's obviously some factors on why it's so congested already and towards the center. I mean, zone is about to start moving, but look at this side of the map. I mean, there's teams out here, there's teams out here that are outside of zone, even up at the north side. I mean, there's a Stark jet that these guys are lingering on, but for the most part, this entire section is free of people almost since they arrived here. A couple moved in and through quickly with good rotates, but that's all. That seems like a high level of respect, maybe, given the fact that these guys are consistently fighting in these areas on the edge of zones. All right, so 5th zone is about to reveal. Let's take a look at the inventory once again. Epic pump, epic AR here for 4ZR. He has crash pads and bouncers and still tons of heals and about 75 mats, you know, half of max. Nate has 116, has a shockwave, has bouncers, has heals as well. Last player, Kesix, epic pump, AR, and fish too. I mean, if you can't see the versatility and strength of this setup, I don't know what to tell you. This is ridiculous. I mean, looking over at Mongrel Mitra, I just zoomed into them at the same time in this game. Sure, they have good weaponry, but lacking slightly on the heals in comparison and certainly lacking in mobility. Plus, we compare all this and the setup, and we also see that they have 3 kills already. Almost every game that I watched, they had 3 elims going into the end game. And I think that contributes to the setup a little bit, but I think the 3 elims are a result of their setup. I think the position that they're able to get consistently in that 5th zone is a result of their fantastic setup. Some of that has to do with them being so aggressive in fighting. I did want to spend a little time showing off the differences in styles of the 2 teams who won the EU weeks. Neither of those weeks they ended up fighting each other, even though they have in the past. They fought in warm-ups, they fought in the Amar Cup, but this team's a lot more passive. They take the more traditional surge approach, and for good reason. They have Janus on their team. This guy's a monster at getting surge tags from range, no matter what AR or sniper or whatever he has. He will literally get you all the surge you need. And, you know, there's the option. It's what he stands on top of the hotel. There's other things too, moving in through the hills and basing up over Salty Springs. Things like this are ideas that you can apply out of Sweaty Sands too. So the interesting thing will be, how do these guys clash when it comes to the grand finals if they both make it there? There's quite a possibility of both these teams trying to duke it out. And I don't know how that's going to go, but if one of these guys gets it uncontested, I think that there is a big claim for maybe these guys having a better start than Dooms or Stark. I do want to note real quick that when they do fight in warm-ups, for example, obviously that was grief mode, there was no stakes, but they tank. And Alex, Janus, and Xweez in 24th here. Kesix, 4ZR, and Nate 22nd in the warm-up. So kind of leads me to believe that grand finals might get a little shaky for both of the teams, but there's always this possibility. So what do you guys think? Do you think that we're kind of overlooking Sweaty Sands a little bit and maybe hyping up the idea of Doom's Domain and Stark Industries a little too much? Or, you know, am I a complete idiot? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video anyways, because there's a lot to learn from all these different ideas, different drop spots, different POIs, plans, surge routes. All this stuff is really interesting to take a look at. So I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, and do all the things on my social media, and we'll be back with more content just like this. Peace.